Hey guys, and welcome to Expert Influencer Academy. I'm your host today, Tia Jean, and I'm going to show you the very basics of using the new Photoshop for Adobe. Hey guys, so I just got back from Adobe MAX a few weeks ago. They showed a lot of new features that are coming on with the Adobe platforms between Sensei and different ways of using that program through Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, all of them. Got to see Spark a little deeper with the developers of it, and actually got to see quite a few things during that. I am putting together a little vlog of my trip there, and it was very fun. Got a lot of free swag, which was nice. But today I wanted to go over the very basics of Photoshop because I found there were not too many videos online that would kind of give you a real rundown on how to use Adobe from the very beginning. You can find people that'll show you specific things, which are very good if you do know how to use the program. But if you do not know how to use the program, then this would be a good way to show you the very basics. I do have my tablet set up, which I can show you. It's a flat screen tablet. It works like my computer screen, except I can use my pen with it instead. But on Adobe, it's got a whole new feature set up with desktop, mobile, web, all these different features that are set up for it now. And then you have your different levels of Photoshop, Illustrator, Lightroom, Premiere Pro, After Effects, Dreamweaver, all the different programs here. And then you also have your updated versions next to it. So you want to look for your latest version, which right now is 21.01, it looks like, because I have 20 and then 19. And today I will show you the new updated one for Photoshop. So let's open that up. I loaded it before because this computer takes a minute, and then it was loading it on a wrong screen. So it was showing it on a different screen. I have 3 up at the moment, so it's just easier to load it up this way. But the new loading screen is different every year. They change it each time. But this is Photoshop, very basics of it. You have your file and edit images layer and everything. You don't really need to know too much about what's going on in these at the very beginning. Just know that one of the easiest ways to set it up is to go up here in your top right, where you have your essentials, your 3D graphics, all of this here. And if you're brand new to Photoshop, you definitely want to either stick with your essentials. I wouldn't do anything with like a new workspace or anything yet until you really know the setup that you like. And properties doesn't kick in until you set up a new thing, because those run differently now, especially differently in Illustrator. And then you want to make sure that you do have your colors up. I like to have swatches because I go through a lot of different colors when I use Photoshop. Brushes for sure, and then of course your brush settings, which will be different once I open up a new thing. But your very first thing that you want to do is go up here to File, and you're going to go to New, and it's going to pull it up on a different screen. All right, so when you go to File, New, this is what you're going to see. This is going to be your first prompt, and it just depends on what you're going for. I usually go with just print myself. I don't really go into art, illustration, web, mobile, film, video. I typically just go into print and I pick my sizes there because you can change your pixels, inches, centimeters. I know what I'm looking for, whether it is a banner for Facebook or Instagram or anything like that. Otherwise, if it's a flyer or comic book, I draw a lot of comic books. And with comic books, I just stick with inches, 8.5 by 11. I stay within those sizes. I usually bump this up to probably about 400, sometimes 350, depending on what your computer can handle. You want to kind of at the lowest use 300 pixels. It depends on designer. Each designer is different on how many pixels that they do. And it also depends on whether or not this is going on the web or if this is going to be a physical print. you got to look up the specs on what you're making. Is the best thing I could tell you is to just kind of Google what you're making and say what are the best specs in Photoshop, and you can actually find more information that way. I'm going to go with 8.5 by 11 landscape. And of course I'm going to do a white background. You can also do a transparent background. That's entirely up to you. And you could do a black background if you like, but if you're just going to draw over top of it, I would do a white background. But you can always change the background. That's no problem. And I wouldn't mess with any of these profiles or anything. Those you do not need. But this would be your basic setup of just a general kind of look on your Photoshop. So you can grab a picture, you can edit the picture, or you can draw on there. This is kind of just your basic look. So from here you can also change the name of it. So we can change it to, so we're going to change it to my picture, and we're going to go create. Exciting. And you'll see the name popped up here. So when you want to go save, you want to go save as. You always want to do this in the beginning. Don't ever go through and do a bunch of stuff with your program and then all of a sudden you realize that you haven't saved it. That is one of the biggest mistakes you can do. So it's going to ask you now, with how Photoshop is set up with the new settings, you can either save to your cloud documents or save to your computer. That one's up to you on how you want it set up. If you don't have a cloud thing set up, definitely save to your computer. And then you would name it PSD, and then you would just pick whatever file location that you're going to put it. For now, I'm actually not going to save this. I'm just going to do it as an example, but you always want to make sure you save, especially in Adobe programs that can be very heavy on your computer, and depending on your computer can actually shut it down. I've had my laptop freezes constantly with the program. So when you are working with Photoshop or Illustrator, any of the Adobe programs, you want to make sure that you save constantly. And I know you can't really do that in Rush too well, but that's a whole other story. So now that I have my page set up, I can go under properties here and you'll see that it's now filled. It tells you the size of yours, the orientation, which you can change, and whether or not you're going to work in RGB, CMYK. If you're going to be doing more prints that are not really flyers, but like I like RGB because you get that true black in it. And CMYK I will usually use if I'm making a flyer for somebody's business, or you know, some more professional kind of pages. But a lot of times I'll still use RGB because you get your truer colors that way, especially for printing. But it just depends on the preference, whether or not you want to, and designers can argue this all day long on which one to use. At my office, I use RGB, and then during the day for my company, I use CMYK most of the time. So it just depends on what you're making and what you like. So we'll keep it RGB for now. You don't need to worry about 8-bit channels or anything like that at the moment. And then these are different like rulers and guides. I always suggest to keep the rulers up here. You can see that come in and out there. Just so that way you can measure it a little bit better. Sometimes it helps you position your pen, or in this case, probably a mouse. Not everybody has the pen set up like I do because I'm spoiled. So I like to have it set up so that way at any point you can grab and drop your markers on your grid. Basically with that, you're just going to click on the top or bottom, and then you can just line up your grid there, and that just helps you. So if you ever need to make a circle or anything and you're like, oh, I need it directly here, you can just be like boop, and then there you go. You have your own little circle exactly where you want it to go. Having your grids up like that and using your lines and your rulers and everything can kind of help you position your pictures and everything on it where you want it to go. Like if you want a wording along the top, you want to make sure that you stay in from the sides a little bit, and oh, I want to go a 1/2 inch from the top. And if you want to go 1/2 inch from the side, so that way you can make sure that all of your wording and all your colors and everything stay within your print area, because you don't want to put anything outside of this area that you don't want to end up on the piece of paper, because you got to also keep in mind, if you are going to print this, you got to stay away from the edge a little bit and keep your subject more in the middle. So, and then over here you also show grids and everything, so if you want to get even more specific, that one's up to you. I don't typically use those for drawing, and then this will just give you the transparency options, and these only are quick actions if you're going to resize an image or crop it or anything. And you definitely want to keep an eye on your layers. So in Photoshop, when you put a background on it, like the white background that I made there, you will have a background locked on it, and this general color you can change if you'd like, or you can just create new layers on top of it. And I'm just going to show you a little trick where you see the little lock there. You can just click on that guy and it'll make it go away. So that way you can do whatever you want with this layer. Now you can go over and use your drop, pick a different color on your color wheel, and just boop. Now you got a different background. It's as simple as that. I'm still getting used to my new program. This whole setup is very different than how you would use a keyboard. You can learn short keys like Control Z will take you back, Control C and V, copy paste, and then with Photoshop, there's several different things that you can use with Control Shift anything, and you can end up copy pasting, changing layers, all kinds of stuff like that, but you don't really need to learn that in the beginning. All of your setups, or anything that you need to do, is going to be up here under your edit, where you'll need to change any transformations to it, or if you need to use any content aware or any kind of movement that you need, those are going to be up there. Your image, you don't really need to mess with any of these too much up here. That does bring you to your adjustments though. So if you bring a picture in and you want to change any of the saturation or color balance, those are up here. And they are also, if you go to your layers and you click on this little kind of half filled in circle guy here, you can also get to them. They're in two different spots, so they're there, and then of course image, adjustments, and here they are here. So let me pull in a picture so that way I can show you a little bit more. So this is a picture from Adobe MAX when I was there, and I'm just gonna click outside of it. So to deselect it like I just did, you either click on another item over here and that'll deselect it, or you can hit enter. And now I have my picture. So I have my image over my background, and you can of course move layers around if it's not locked. And then you can move your layers on top of each other. That is one thing that is kind of hit and miss with using Photoshop, is using the different layers. So if you have an image behind your other image and it's not, the opacity isn't half or anything, or if you're not doing anything funky with it, it's a little bit more difficult to use it, depending on whether or not you are playing with a picture or if you're drawing a picture. So if you're using this just for photo editing, so you want to make sure whatever layer you're using, you've selected. So if you have an image that you're going to edit, under here, that I showed you before with your different colors, hues, saturations, or anything like that, you can select like hue, saturation that I just did, and then you just kind of want to slide it around and play with the settings. And as you can see, it changes the colors on the image for you. So these are just easy ways to quickly edit a picture. You can turn up the saturation, mess with the brightness, turn up that brightness a little bit because it was really dark in there, and then check your contrast so that way you can bring in a little bit of that darkness back in there. And then you can go under your levels, and then these are just like low, your dark levels, your medium range, whites and blacks, and where you can kind of pull those whites and blacks and darkness, and changing because you can kind of see it up in the upper corner here. Watch this as I move it. You can see where it changes your levels of light that the image is taking in. You can also select it in certain areas as well, and it'll darken or lighten depending on what you're trying to do with it. At the beginning, I wouldn't suggest going too crazy into things like that, because sometimes you can completely darken up an image or mess with an image. But those are just some easy first steps of figuring out how to edit a photo. Now, if you're not just wanting to edit a photo and you want to edit, let's just do a circle. So I just hit the new layer button right here, which is right next to your trash can. Be careful of hitting that. Make sure you know where your Control Z is. So anyway, you would make a new layer, and in this layer, let's make another circle. So one way to make a perfect circle is you can hold down your Shift key, click anywhere on your screen, and pull. This is what'll make your shape whatever size that you want, and then once you have the size you like, lift up and then let go of Shift. Otherwise, it's gonna go all kinds of wonky if you let go of Shift beforehand, and then you get a crazy little circle. Since I put those both on the same layer, you can see they're now attached. That's one bad thing with working with Photoshop with the different layers. I'm used to now Illustrator that'll just automatically make a new layer per item that you have. In Photoshop, it does not do that. It keeps it all on the same layer. So now they're together, they live together. So I'm just gonna get rid of that. So I have my little circle here, and you can see the little markers come up. That'll help show you exactly where the middle is. So you can aim it up on the screen and it'll be perfectly in the middle. Photoshop is seriously trying to help you with everything. So you can do different things with this. If you go to its layer here and you double click on it, this will bring up your prompt of your different layer styles. In here, you can do all kinds of things with bevel and emboss. You can add a stroke to it. That's white, that one's dark. You can change up your sizes of the stroke that's going around your item, whether or not you want it on the outside or the inside of the circle or center of the circle. And the center of the circle line means that the line is directly in the middle, and it'll go evenly out each side. So if you want it on the outside, it's usually the best, especially when you're doing wording, because sometimes it can kind of alter the image a little bit if it's on the inside or if it's on the center. Your blending mode, that just depends on whether or not you want to do anything funky with it here. Definitely play around with the settings and depending on what you want to do. You can of course change the opacity of it, where it's got more see-through to less see-through to where it's all the way dark. And then of course you can change the color of it to whatever color you want it to be on your color wheel here. And let's pick a color that is not blue. There you go. And of course, playing around with your settings, whatever you want it to do. So you can also do color overlays. So say if you didn't like that color before, you can always overlay a new color for it. And with color overlay, that usually works better with pictures when you're kind of doing different settings over top of it. And then of course, gradient overlay, where you can add different gradient styles to it. These are mostly preset. I have a couple in here that are not preset, but you can go in and select the different colors and it'll give it a nice little overlay. So that's just kind of a basic rundown on how to get started on Photoshop of playing with it. Definitely mess with all the swatches and all the brushes that it has available on it, but that's just a simple way of setting up your layers and starting a new image. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was helpful in getting started and learning about where your properties are and some of your settings. Please check it out and let me know if there's any video that you would like to see in the future. Please comment about it in the comments below. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and if it was helpful to you, please share it with anyone that you know is new to Photoshop and needs some help. And of course, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye! In green screen background.